Okay. So it is for everyone to feel heard, seen, acknowledged, and that
And
we kind of raise the level of empathy and connection with the four of us, for
and they have
example.
right, and they have to feel safe.
Yeah, so but the level of empathy or connection or safety that we might feel, that varies. That's not a constant. So I know empathic connection, whether I'm feeling connected to the two of you, the three of you, or
Hmm.
not, that goes up and down. If so, I don't think that's a constant. So I think what can be constant is valuing that.
Uh,
And what can be constant is having practices for producing that. But we can't. It's like feelings. Feelings go up and down. We have
Hmm.
different amounts of feelings, and um, feeling empathic towards another person or feeling like you have an empathic connection with another person, that's variable.
Hmm.
It varies.
I'm not sure if I'm on the same page, but I think that, well, it become, I see, right now I see three very important aspects of culture of empathy. First is what I said, and more or less we agree all about it, this relational
Hmm.
aspect of culture. Second is the fact I I like this idea of dynamic, using word dynamic, because I believe it's a process, and I hear that in your what all of you are saying, but it's important to express that and highlight that this is a process. It's not a state of culture. It's a process, all the time process.
Hmm.
Well, our
And
valuing it can be constant, saying that it's a value and saying that we're committed to it, that we want it, that can be consistent. But whether
well,
we're experiencing it, whether it's actually happening, that's dynamic, I think.
well, the problem is that every culture has its own set of values. The set of values we are aware and sort of uncovered agenda or uncovered set of values. So we can say that competition is one of the value of the modern culture, for example, and it's kind of openly accepted competition of individual. But there is also under kind of the second bottom of this value that is hatred and a kind of ill competition.
You said evil competition. Is that what you said?
I said ill competition,
Oh,
but
okay,
yeah, ill
yeah, I
competition.
get it.
Well, I'm not sure if that's what I feel like I'm not precise today, but every culture has set of values that is openly announced, and kind of set of value that is not really announced, but it is there. And the thing is, what is the set of value for culture of empathy? And I started to name aspects of culture of empathy, and one is this relational aspect. Second is the perceiving it as a process, and third, very important, is personal attitude, I believe. We used to ignore our own approach, our own attitude to everything we are doing, but this is the crucial thing. We might have different attitude to the conflict, to the quarrel, and we might differently behave. in culture of empathy, I love this moment when we decide to start our meeting with 3 minute silence, when everybody can use this 3 minutes for his or her own purpose. But it is good to think whom I want to be during this meeting. What kind of person I want to be in this discussion. What kind of leader I want to be, what kind of facilitator I want to be. If there will be conflict, what kind of person I want to be in this conflict. That's an aspect of taking care of my own attitude to other people and to the issue I deal with. So it is very important. I see it as a kind of very often ignored element of culture, our own attitude.
Is it sort of like self-connection to your own self? You know what I mean? It's like you're sort of connecting to your own feelings.
Yeah, it also might be that sort of connection with myself. Yeah, how I feel today and what I'm experiencing right now. But
yeah, you're feeling.
But
I'm hearing
also
you're feeling down.
But also my approach to others and to the problem we're dealing with. So.
Well, that seems to tie in with what Lou is saying about that we can't have these values that are consistent. We can, even if we aren't manifesting the value of, let's say, connection or listening, you know, because we get really upset or we have all kinds of things that are blocking those. So we can still have that intention and sort of even an agreement that this is kind of the type of relationship that we want, and then kind of come back to that if you get off of it.
Yeah,
it's that variability of empathy.
The thing is that I feel like you put more you more emphasize the connection to myself. That wasn't my intention. I believe it's also important, but what I was trying to express was just attitude to others, to other people, and to the issue I deal with. And obviously it has something to do with how I feel and how I connect to myself. But the most important thing is my relation to others, my attitude to others. That's what I see as important thing.
Well, what do you see as your attitude towards us? I mean, right
Yes.
now, I mean, what do you see? I'm just curious to try to tap into what you're talking about. What do you see as the attitude towards us?
I don't mean nothing particular right now. I see it in general. So I don't know. You want to go to empathy circle now?
Well, I'm just curious, like, you know, to tie in the felt experience of what you're talking about. I'm not quite sure. Like, the attitude I have is a bit of concern. I see that you're sort of low energy. It seems like you're struggling. And I feel like a sense of concern because I have a feeling of wanting, you know, your well-being. So I do, you know, that's sort of something that comes up for me.
Well, I don't want to waste time for. I truly I feel not very well today. That's true, but I don't want to waste time for it. I'm trying to be as much precise as I can. So I said this relational aspect, personal attitude, process.
That's 3.
And for the fourth one, I see for now, because maybe I will see more in the future, is empathic time space. No, in English you say space time. Okay.
Space time. Right.
Yeah, you use term space time, and right. I love this term, and I would like to incorporate this term into the whole idea of culture of empathy. empathic space-time, because it's kind of very complex problem to have this space to talk, to resolve problems, and also have this psychological space-time in my mind, in my soul. It's a mixture of real space-time and capability of being part of the culture. So it's quite complicated. I can't describe it very precisely, but I think there is something about it.
Okay. Well, I like what a lot of you said. I think I feel somewhat in alignment. I feel, I think that I'm trying to like bridge the gap for when Carolina talks about community and I talk about individuals. I see the connection. I don't know if, you know, and therefore when you're reflecting on yourself, you're doing it for the relationship. In other words, if you're doing it correctly, you're doing it in a relational way. And the only thing that I would like to, you know, sure, is celebrate the individual for doing that rather than try to shame them or to criticize them for not doing it. And I think that we sort of agree. And I just want to get some sort of structure together that, you know, that we can sort of, that's what I'm feeling, pressure to kind of like, all right, let's, you know, let's not quibble too much. Let's come up with a structure. And this is just me expressing my needs. It may or may not be a good idea. And let's stick on something because, I mean, we talked about my rubric earlier. I believe in my rubric, but it doesn't have to be the rubric. If people don't like the rubric, we can still go ahead and do things. But let's get something, you know, I feel the need to kind of, you know, glom onto a structure and then work with that structure. That's it.
Can you say
what is that structure? What do you mean by creating a structure? What does that really mean? Like,
well, I mean,
using envisioning, you know, he proposed a process of saying we're living now in a culture of empathy. What's it like, and how did we get there? And we use that process, right?
Yeah, you can use that process. I'm fine with any other kind of like, or just a popcorn, you know, that we throw out. Like include, and I agree. You know, really like mutuality, the concept of mutuality, which is like a core, which is then goes to what Carolina says in, you know, relational or something like that. So, you know, just kind of like getting into that kind of, you know, not splitting hairs and, you know, going ahead. But I do like the idea of starting and going backwards, but whatever it is, you know, I can work with that just as long as you get somewhere.
You know, I have about like 10 more minutes before I have to go. I would just like to say two things. One, I agree completely with what Carolina said about, you know, you can write a perfect document and develop a perfect system, and having a document and a system won't make it happen because because human beings are implementing that system and they have whatever relationships they have. So it really is the relationships people build with each other that makes something happen. Which isn't to say it's not worth creating documents, like making statements about what you care about. Just recognize that, you know, that's not going to be the end of it. So I completely agree with that. The other thing that I think might be an important contribution is that, so in nonviolent communication, they talk about universal human needs. So these are needs or values that are present in all people, in all cultures. So like the desire for respect, the desire for connection and belonging, the desire for meaning, the desire for some kind of spiritual connection to something, the desire for beauty. And there, you know, and there's like 5 or 6 different areas where these values are expressed, like physical safety, or and then there's things that create meaning. Anyway, I don't want to use too many words to describe this, but just to make it simple, something like respect is desired in every culture. But the way in which people express respect or make the meaning that someone is respecting me out of what happens, that varies culture to culture. So like in some cultures, looking at a person in the eye when you speak to them, that's respectful. Other cultures, if you did that, that's disrespectful. Mm-hmm. So, and that's actually the source of a lot of conflict, is we all have the same basic desires, but we have different ways of pursuing them. And we have judgments about how others pursue those things. So I like the way I do it, and I think it's right. And I think the meaning of respect is inherent in the thing that I do. But actually that's not true. And I may have judgments of the way other people show respect, like that is definitely not respectful. But the truth is, what is respectful is defined by the culture. Whatever the culture agrees to as being a sign of respect, that's what it is. And so if we create some kind of document that says we're trying to create a culture of empathy, and we value empathy, and whatever other things we value, the thing we have to recognize is that different people may have different ways of expressing that. And in NVC and in nonviolence, one of the ways of creating connections across differences is to recognize what is the meaning of the action to that person, or what basic human need are they trying to express, even though they be expressing it poorly. They may even be pursuing it in a way that creates the opposite of what they're hoping for. But if I can see the desire that they are expressing in what they're doing, even though I don't like it, even though I disagree with it, even though it may be hurting me, if I can see their desire, I am seeing them more as a human being, because I'm recognizing that desire in them. And that lets me connect with them, and that gives me a pathway to a dialogue with them about, so why are you doing this? And is it really accomplishing what you want? And, I see your desire for this. Could we maybe do this another way? It opens a pathway to having, so that's actually more than I intended to say, but I think the conversation that we are having, I think that idea of universal human needs and the ways that different cultures express those needs or pursue them, I think is relevant to what we're trying to do. Phil, now go.
Yeah. So just quickly, and I think that a universal practice. See, we're basically saying, hey, this is a good idea. This is better than going to the movies, or whatever else you can do. And I think a basic practice towards achieving that is listening. Mm-hmm. And that's where we go, and we focus on that listening, the ability to listen to the other and to make that social agreement that Lou's talking about. And we do that through listening, and we do it through this type of listening.
Right, empathic, right, trying to make an empathic connection with the other person, yes.
So that's the term, I think, that for seeing those those universal needs, I would say is common humanity. That's sort of the term, I think, that kind of points, encompasses like seeing those basic human needs. So we refer to that we see the common humanity of everyone, mm-hmm. or at least have the intention of seeing, and just seeing there is that common humanity. So I see that term, common humanity, is a core component of, a culture of empathy. And that kind of points to those universal needs. There's one thing with NVC, though, that I've been trying to, kind of get my head around, is the difference between sort of these individualistic sort of human needs and a sense of a cultural, relational needs. That there's something that bothers me about NVC, that it tends to has sort of like it's my needs, it's almost narcissistic in terms of seeing the needs. It's like, And there's something else about really, there's sort of like relational needs that I don't know, that need to be saying. You could say, you can kind of extrapolate NVC, and I mean, just Rosenberg's vision of needs. But yeah,
so I would say, I mean, a community or a culture is made up of people. Without that, there isn't a community culture. So the community can't really have needs outside the people. Now, what you're calling a community need is a need that everyone shares. So they have it individually, and they recognize that everyone else has it too, and that we would all be served by doing X, Y, or Z to meet that need jointly. So that's the way I see what you're saying. And the other thing you're saying about narcissism, so NVC, because of its focus on needs, tends to attract people whose needs have not been met for a long time, and they come to it with a lot of pain. And so when they find a group that recognizes that they do have needs and that they value needs, they then, their pain around that makes them say, well, good, I'm not giving up my needs. I have my needs, and you have to meet them. And,
exactly. You're not meeting my needs. I mean, I hear that all the time. You're not meeting my needs, so fuck you.
But then the needs were important, so I get all of them met.
Yeah.
Because I haven't gotten them met for a long time. So, and those people are they're not really functioning in a healthy way.
Right.
And, those people need to be treated with care, and, but it's true that NVC people can be narcissistic in that way. And it's because they're trying to heal from the thing that, I mean, a healthy person recognizes the needs that they have, and then they make a decision. Am I going to try to assert those right now? Or I have other needs that are present also. It's not like you have one need only. We all have multiple needs at the same time, and we prioritize the ones that seem strongest for us. And for me, so I may have a need for X, and if I look and I see, well, other people are having lots of needs too, do I want to align with that, or do I want to assert my need at the moment? That's what a healthy person does, is aware of all those.
Yeah, there's an awareness of the larger context, right? That there's all these needs, there's a whole field of needs, and there's an openness to the whole context of all the needs that are need to be addressed, and how do we sort of address those needs versus here's my individual need of the moment, and I'm totally consumed with that. And so it needs to be that would help to articulate that common humanity of needs, that it's that openness of the relationship of all the field, almost like the field of needs that it can be held in a healthy way. So
yeah, I think that I agree with all that, and I think that sort of gets away from what we're I mean, that's what we don't want to do, is to get into a field of needs, fields and fields of needs, and because a healthy person also, in addition to that, has like a little something left in the tank for somebody else.
Right.
It's like when I'm really feeling on and facilitating, and I see someone with a real need and they're going through a tough time, if I can then adapt to that, then I feel, competent. I feel more competent and more skillful. And then I realize, even though I don't come to the meeting with that, it's presented, and I find that there's that capacity in me to adapt to that.
I think having the intention to hold an awareness of the field of needs or that common humanity, it just even to articulate that, to get it, to know that that's sort of a state of being, and as an intention, it kind of helps to keep from, like for example, I was doing an empathy circle with my sister-in-law, and she came up with this. She had this pain, but it was all her pain. And then she said, "Why are you talking to my brother? I have this pain, my brother, in the empathy circle." And I said, "Well, everybody has pain." It's like this thing that you're feeling is universal. So it's like, and it was almost like a little light bulb, I think, kind of went off. It was, oh, really? Other people have pain too?
Well, that's just what mutuality. Yeah, I mean mutuality, and that's that concept. I just think when we're talking about vision here, we want to just kind of like make something simple. We can say something about needs, but if we try to delineate, needs and categorize them and prioritize them and things like that, then I think we just, for the purposes of this vision statement, then we overcomplicate them. That's the only thing.
Well, there are certain concepts like common humanity that sort of holds all those details, I think, of
right, but
those needs. So you don't need to go into the weeds, but have kind of a broader concepts or terms that kind of hold that meaning as well as as can be.
Sure. No, there's nothing against that. But then what's the vision? How do we get there? What are we contributing to that? And that's where I think our vision comes in. And I think that, we've answered. I mean, listening respectfully and doing all of that, that's an actual practice that actually gets us towards that if we practice that.
So I have to go, and I'm sorry that that's the case. And I'm sorry again that I joined late. So this has been a really interesting discussion. I'd like in for continuing, and just let me know when you set up a next time to do this. And Bill, if you'd send me the rubric, I'd be interested in seeing that.
Sure. Okay.
Can you join us next time, this next week, this time?
Good. Let me look. Yes. So I have so let's see, 8:30, 9:30, 10. Yes. So I do have something regular at 8:30 in the morning on Mondays now, but I'm guessing that I will be able to do it by 10. If we moved it to 10:30, that probably would be better for me. If others can do that.
I can do it.
I can do it.
Okay,
Yeah.
10:30.
Okay, so we'll make it 10:30.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, great.
All right. See you, Lou.
See you. Well, it sounds like you're a bit in a hurry to get to our statement, Bill, or
yeah, I mean, not in a hurry. I'm expressing, my frustration and stuff like that as far as, because I mean, I in one sense I understand how difficult this is and what we're trying to do, and really, it is. And the other thing is that, yeah, I'm just we really have to kind of like come up with some sort of common thing, some structure. If it's not a rubric, or like I heard what you said about assessments, that's not quite what I meant, but that's okay. It can be expressed other ways. It doesn't have to be expressed in a rubric. I'll send it around. You guys think what you think, but I do think we need a structure. And I think, like Carolina said, at some point, like if you die, and not, I don't mean to be morbid, but like if you died today, what would you like to leave? What would you like, like if Carolina and I and Lou and the rest were carrying on, what would you like us to do? What would you, what would be important to you and things like that. And that goes to what, in a less morbid way, what Carolina was talking about is what we want to leave for our children and stuff. So yeah, I'm feeling that frustration because I like to do that, and then I like to create the structure, and then I like to take it apart, and then and move it around and do that. But that's it. But
where are you seeing the structure? I've been taking notes here. I mean, what?
No,
where is this structure? Where is this structure emerge? Or
well, we have to get to it to emerge. I mean, you take a lot of. It's not a criticism. You take a lot of notes, but it also creates a lot of white noise, and it creates a lot of detail, and and I think it's great. I mean, in some, it's a tremendous resource, but it also then tends to obfuscate and get us bogged down into details and not get us to actually get to actionable stuff. So I think we have to struggle with that. We have to get to something where somebody coming in new, has a path. And then once we feel comfortable with that, it may not be perfect, but once we feel comfortable with that, kind of stick with it, modify it, but go forward. The sort of thing, that sort of thing. So it's a creative tension.
Well, how do we create that path? Like, how are you envisioning that kind of happening? Like, one thing is we do a lot of talking. I mean, I agree.
Yeah.
But when we just talk about it, it just floats out. We can record it, but then, then there's the note taking, which I agree. I create a lot of notes, but there's that next step of, writing it up, which is so painful and time consuming that's where I get kind of bogged down. And some people are really good at that. And so I'm kind of just looking at sort of the flow of how to be sort of efficient and effective.
Sure. Well, I hear you. And I also, I really feel that, your personal investment and struggle in all of this too. So one of the things, it's an actionable thing. I'd be willing to sit down with you, and go over the notes, and then start to. And I'd be willing to make like a weekly time, either to do it online or to do it in person, to try to streamline things or get it with Carolina, and then not assuming that that's a finished product, but then showing it to Lou and Carolina and David and Bob and everybody else. But to start to, get a process, it's something we kind of have to work out. But that is something that I'd be willing to really put, time into.
Okay. So it's just hammering out the notes, organizing them, and then sharing that and getting feedback on it.
Yeah.
Like
but
that,
really,
kind of an iterative process to.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and then that could be the subject of the next, that could be like of this vision meeting. Okay, this is what we came up with this week. And I'm certainly not excluding Carolina or Lou or anybody who wants to actually participate in that particular thing. Or maybe we take part of this meeting to look at what your notes are, and we all do that. I'm just looking at various ways, but I'm looking.
Yeah, Carolina's been making notes. She had the assessments, the elements of a culture of empathy, and has been adding aspects on page 2.
I think that this is a good idea to spend, for example, if we organize discussions, so we spend 1 hour on discussion and another hour on notes, or 45 minutes on notes you made. So we can kind of rediscuss once more, kind of making a loop, but looking at the notes. And I believe that as long as we discuss and try to figure out the whole concept, we can work this way. But in the moment when the text we want to create, I suppose it should be you, Edwin, because this is your baby mostly. You should write the text, and we should leave our commentaries. Well, I observe people in different organizations, not just XR, but also other organizations. They create those Google Docs, and everybody make changes in those documents, and it's very chaotic. It's impossible. It has to have one author, main author, and others who kind of support this one author of the text, because otherwise this text will be chaotic.
I'd be willing to start.
At some point when you will start writing it, we should help you with our comments, but not correcting or making any changes in your text. And we have to kind of accept the fact that you are the main author of the text. That's
Well,
what
that's fine. Yeah, I don't give my sovereignty over to anybody. I don't. I mean, I don't disagree with what you said, and that, you know, like I was going to say that, you know, why don't we start with your sign? You know, what does a culture of empathy mean? You know, I support a culture of empathy. It means mutual dialogue. You know, that would be a wonderful, I mean, I'd be fine with that. So I accept that. But as far as where I get off or what I will say, I don't give that. In the culture of empathy, I have to feel, you know, accepted to say what I want to, you know, to say. You know, albeit maybe not at the time that I feel like I have to say.
So you want to be heard about.
Well, I'm not saying it is your baby, and I think that, and for me, the legitimacy of that is the fact that you came up with, this is a culture of empathy, and you have that, you flip the sign and it says mutual dialogue, and I think that's great, and so I'm suggesting we use that as sort of a jumping off point. Maybe you sit with it for a week and see how you might want to revise it. You know, but if I, for instance, I felt strongly that a different word would be better, like in, you know, what was that? You know, then I'm going to make a comment like that. I'm not going to pre-censor myself. But that being said, you know, I love what you've done, and I feel very supportive of it. And I don't feel my creativity is meant to take down, but to enhance. You know, that's my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That we want, I see that as a document that people can, you know, it's sort of a flowing document that we could modify. But I guess there was the issue like Carolina's saying, that if it becomes, yeah, how do you have it be, what is it? If a lot of people are working on a document, can it turn into, you know, a coherent document, or does it take one person to sort of, you know, hone it and then kind of take feedback and so forth in it? So what's kind of the relationship between those two? You know, what's sort of effective?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
Another thing is that we can make a decision. I don't know how big text we want to create, but it might have some structure, and different parts might be wrote by different people. And another possibility is that we create kind of a coherent one text, but we also explain how this text and his content was created. And after this text, main text, we can create a kind of, we can start recording our discussion and publish them. I mean, script of those talks, and it might create, well, we will make a script of our discussion, and we obviously will authorize those discussion, cut off the you know, the long tags without meaning and that sort of thing, and just living kind of together, editing our dialogues, our conversations we recorded.
So it's sort of like a starting point, and then we discuss the different aspects, record that discussion, and kind of add.
As an addition to the main text. So it might be kind of enriching the whole thing. I don't know. It's just something that came out.
I think, yeah, we can do that. But again, I want to focus on getting the main text. And so what I'm feeling is that, yeah, Edwin, I mean, we do have to make a coherent text, but we're sentient adults. And that's the point, kind of the point of the culture of empathy, that we all believe, whatever angle we come, we want people to be more empathic and to listen to each other and to create this, you know, culture. But part of that is to trust the individual that they will do that. You know, that this is not, like, that's what I said, you're uncovering a basic human value that goes back I won't wax philosophically. So yeah, and it's your baby. Let's start with what you mean. I think that's excellent.
Okay.
Start what you mean, and then go there, and then and we'll bump it around, and we'll edit and do things like that. But and I commit to making it coherent.
Okay. So in terms of a culture of empathy, it's like seems like the document should embody the essence of it, right? The spirit of a culture of empathy. And the culture of empathy is that everyone is heard, that we have an equal voice, everyone is equally heard. And the empathy is an integrative process, right? We're integrating, you have ideas, like I have ideas, we have, the needs, I have needs, Carol, we all have needs, and that the empathizing with each other is sort of this integrative process. So it's somehow we want the document to be this integrative process where everyone is heard, and all the voices come in and we sort of negotiate and integrate. We want to integrate, empathically integrate, our each other. Yeah, Carolina?
We can't create text about culture of empathy not using the method of empathy circle.
Yeah.
Okay.
We might need to do empathic listening to do it.
It is very important to incorporate this method to our
I think
our work on this text.
so. What I hear Carolina saying is that, is in addition that the practice should be included in our in our vision statement. That actually you have to be practicing listening, not just talking about it, not saying, and not just taking a test or assessing yourself on a rubric. You're in the process of listening. That's what I hear.
I'm not sure if I understand you. I'm afraid I didn't.
Okay, so there were two things, as I heard Edwin reflect you, that you felt that we should do the listening, empathic listening, as part of a process to establish the vision statement. And what I heard was a little bit different, in that in the vision statement, we should incorporate the action of doing the circle. That doing the circle and the action is core to the goal.
What goal?
Creating a culture of empathy.
He was trying to reflect you, and if you don't feel understood, you could just say it again.
I meant, well, I'm not sure what you mean right now, but I meant that empathy circle should be the method we use creating this statement, vision statement.
Okay.
But what you are saying might be interesting, so I would like to understand that. I would like to get what you mean. I'm afraid I don't understand that.
Sure. Just generally speaking, what I'm talking about is creating for people, like you said, a dynamic picture of themselves, and the way they progress, core to our vision, is through the empathy circle. So that if you're going to do a core, so the practice is actually part of the core. In other words, the experience. And, maybe we don't need to say that explicitly or spend too much time on it. And I'm fine doing empathy circles and doing this reflection too. That's not, it's not it. But I think that the practice is core to the goal.
So I'd be up for using empathic listening. If we shift into empathic listening, we have I moved it to the top of page 2, the notes, to kind of give it priority. What does a culture of empathy mean to you? And we already have some aspects of it that we could kind of just keep fleshing out, but use empathic listening to discuss it. Lou was saying, oh, it takes time, but that is, again, what empathic listening does. It takes time. So
right, and I'm suggesting is that rather than start with that question, we start with your answer to that question, and then we work off that.
okay,
But
so
I would be but you know, again, that's my suggestion, and I'll be flexible. Yeah, so I said, you know, a culture's empathy is mutual listening, things like that. Work on that, and then, you know, and just use that. Start using these models.
okay, so having, in terms of what are the aspects or elements of a culture of empathy?
Mhm.
We could just go down the list and discuss each of these that are already forming, because each of those is what I see as part of the culture of empathy and common.
What, I'm not sure I'm on the same.
Oh, this is on page 2 of the shared document. Like, what does a culture of empathy mean
Okay.
to you?
Oh,
What are
got
the
it.
aspects of it?
Yeah, got it.
So, so does that work, that we would just go through those points? Step 1, you know, 1, and then we just use empathic listening to discuss and then move on to the next one?
Sure, I think we can try that. I mean, like, and with the goal of, like, I see empathy, integrative relationality, and mutuality, I feel should be like combined into one thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. That's sort of what we're doing, you know, here.
Okay,
But that's just my.
Different things. They are different things. Well, it's just intuition, but they are different things. Relationality and mutuality.
But we have to make a practical decision whether someone reading that would be able to pick up the nuance of your intuition or not. And we have to make, and so we have to, I think we got to go with something, even if it's not precise, it's, you know, it would cover it, and we leave it open-ended.
I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot about intuition. I have a headache. It's difficult to think for me now. So
Sure, okay.
when I say intuition, I just mean right now that I can't express myself well now.
well, could we go into empathic listening to just select who you're speaking to? I mean, I can reflect, like I hear that you're feeling some pain, you have a headache, and it's kind of inhibiting kind of your, you know, thinking and your process. And
Yeah.
do you feel heard, or is there more?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll speak back to you. We could close. I feel concerned that, you know, if you're feeling in pain, it may just be inhibiting to work on this. So I can really feel your pain, but then again, maybe just being heard could help with the pain too. So I don't know.
I don't want to focus the whole situation on me. I'm sorry if you. It's true, I can't focus right now. It's difficult for me, but maybe you have some good ideas and you can continue.
Okay.
I would like to just watch this video later on, or just listen. I just don't feel well.
You don't want to kind of look into your own self, but just we can talk and you can check back later then.
Yeah, this way or another, but yeah, I don't want just to stop you discussing just because I feel not very well.
Okay.
Well, then I'll speak to Bill then.
Okay.
So I like what we're talking about. Just that we have we have what are the aspects and elements of a culture of empathy, and we start listing some ideas there and then start discussing it. So that works for me.
Okay, so you like the thing about taking the raw data that we have and start to discuss them point by point.
Mhm. And I had moved up the integrative aspect of it. So it seems to me that a core aspect of, a culture of empathy is that there's an integrative process
Mm-hmm.
that we're sort of integrating, so our felt experience and our thoughts, our feelings, and that so that and that actually contrasts from maybe an authoritarian way, which is, one person decides, suppresses others, and so I would just make that as a core aspect of the culture of empathy, that it's an integrative element. That integration is a core element aspect of the culture of empathy.
Okay, so you moved up those three things because you had then basically put them in as subsets of integration or an integrative experience. And you find that integration is a core value of the culture of empathy.
And the part about the authoritarian is it compared to, contrasting it, that I guess authoritarianism is a sort of an integrative process too, but it dominates, right? It kind of dominates something dominates. So is a contrast, integrative power with versus authoritarian. So I guess I'm kind of looking into the aspect of a culture of empathy and contrasting it, getting some clarity about a culture of empathy by contrasting it to other modes.
Okay, so you also feel that there's a core value to a culture of empathy that is not included in the authoritarian model. That the authoritarian model is integrative in the fact that everybody has to do it, but the main aspect, as I hear, that is left out is listening to people and then incorporating their ideas as well.
Yeah, so yeah, I feel heard.
Okay. All right, so I'll talk back to you and Carolina.
Okay.
So I also want Carolina to feel better, and that her feelings are, part. It's nothing different from and as important as going. Because if we can't go ahead and Carolina feel supported, then we're not creating a culture of empathy. So here's a real test for us.
Mm-hmm. So you have concern for Carolina, and that we have concern for her as part of a culture of empathy. So we're, if we're not concerned about her, it's kind of not a culture of empathy.
So our concern is we're doing the work of a culture of empathy. And what I see in Carolina and some of the things where the models is that you can have a perfect constitution and still not, and still the result is the opposite of what you envision. And so therefore, I think that we have to do, we have to compromise on having a perfect vision statement and things like that. And that we need to be able to make things accessible to people. So not now, but I would ask Carolina to take a look at those things. You took mutuality, relational, and then merged it into what you call integrative experience. And if there's another term, thinking about it throughout the week that Carolina would feel more comfortable with, or something like that, where we can make it accessible to people. Because if we make it too specific, people won't be able to access it.
Mm-hmm. So you're kind of looking at the word integrative is not so accessible, and you're looking for like terms that would make like the culture of empathy, the vision of it, more accessible. So it's really accessibility is kind of.
No, I mean, integrative is fine with me. I mean, one of those, I would be fine with mutuality. I like mutuality. Relationality, I'm not against that. Dynamics, what was it? Oh, integrated. And so I'm fine with one, either one of those. I don't think it has to be perfect, or we have to split hairs of vocabulary, syntax and things like that. I think we need to kind of pick a general area and then go with that has the basic idea, and in order to make an effective vision.
Mm-hmm. So you want to, for an effective vision, you're wanting to just get sort of the highlights, maybe? I don't know if that's true, but you're...
Well, just to really look at a core, like again, we need to put a dynamic vocabulary, one that guides people but doesn't, hem them in, guides people in the right direction, but doesn't necessarily, but is not too prescriptive.
So you're wanting something that's sort of a guiding, sort of a vocabulary that's guiding people, but is not too
too lost in the weeds.
Too lost in the weeds. So you're looking for something that's more accessible.
Right. Easily accessible that guides people in the right direction. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, so you really want something that's easily accessible in the right direction.
Right.
Is there more?
Not right now, no.
Okay. Well, yeah, so I guess for me, I don't know what that means. What is something? I didn't hear, like, what is something that's easily accessible? I hear we want something that's easily accessible, but what do you see as easily accessible?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that is easily accessible, and is it really accessible? How do we kind of test the accessibility of it?
Okay, so you have questions about what I said. Is that what do I mean by easily accessible, and how do we means test it to see whether it's being effective?
Yeah, and I want accessibility too. I want it as easy. I'm totally there with you. How do we make it easily accessible? Anybody can kind of get started, and accessible. But I'm totally there with you for accessibility, that people can kind of engage in it.
So you're all for accessibility and making it easily accessible. But again, you're still kind of looking at, well, what does that mean? How do we?
Yeah, I feel heard.
Okay. And so, like, the way we do it is we take like those similar things like mutuality and relationality and things like that, and we kind of combine them. And we just that's one way we do it. And I give you the example of the CD versus the iPod, the Apple player, in that the sense that the CD had better quality sound, but it took up a lot of bandwidth and things like that, and that the MP3 system was not quite, it was still good quality, but not quite as good a quality. But the less bandwidth made you able to have like a whole bunch of songs and things like that. And so that made it a much more practical tool. And that's what I see sort of what we need to do, that not necessarily worry about the perfect as opposed to the utilizable. And we do that by using, finding that sweet spot between micromanaging, you don't want that, and, open, like, amorphous, something like that. So mutuality, I think, is a good term for me in those three things that kind of, gives us guidance, but it's not too prescriptive.
Mm-hmm. So you're wanting something that it's not too open, too sort of free-flowing, versus something that's really prescriptive, and trying to find a spot that's in between. And for you, it would be either, sounds like combining relationality and mutuality as two things, or just using mutuality.
Right.
Would be sort of a simplifying it.
Yeah, and either one of the words if we decided, but the concept of sort of making something that's good enough, and then giving people wiggle room but that sort of thing. So you're looking for a sweet spot. In teaching, we call that the ZPD, the zone of proximal development. That if you make something too easy, people, kids can do it and they don't really care about it. If you make it too hard, they give up because they can never attain it. And that zone of proximal development is where they have to kind of exert and expand their skills, but it is doable to get the brass ring or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. So there's sort of a range of too simple and too difficult. Mm-hmm. It sounds like, and then you kind of want to find sort of that spot that.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I've been heard. Yeah, okay. That's right.
Yeah, so I had some thoughts as you were speaking. Like when you're talking, I could see, these ideas kind of pop in, and then and then I listen and kind of focus, and then I kind of forget them. So it takes a while to kind of get them back. So maybe just a reflection on that.
So you had some ideas that popped into your head, and then they were listening to me, and they popped out, and you're kind of waiting to retrieve them.
Yeah, so it's like about relationality and mutuality. Oh, I know it. See, that's what happens. It kind of comes back when you kind of tap into it. So, I see that there's sort of different philosophies or different sort of concepts. For example, Carl Rogers, he created a sort of a vision of what a effective, kind of a worldview in a sense, and for humanist psychology. And you have the concept that he had, and then you have about 3 sort of sub-concepts of it. And I've seen that pattern a lot. You have a main concept and a couple of, and so his concepts were, empathy, unconditional positive regard, and in the sense, he had kind of more technical terms, but the essence was empathy, care, and authenticity, I'd say, is sort of like sub-concepts for effective relationship. So I have seen that, sort of model of a concept like a culture of empathy, and like 3 kind of sub-concepts. So that's just something that's coming to mind that I'm thinking about.
Okay, so you're thinking about Carl Rogers and his 3 concepts, which was empathy, authenticity,
and care,
and then care.
Yeah. So and so I just kind of wonder, okay, do we hone it down to just a couple of, sub-concepts, the core? So I'm kind of like thinking of, okay, and then there was relationality and mutuality. Mutuality is kind of big, when in terms of describing, mutual listening, mutual care, mutual dialogue, so that mutuality is an important concept that we're doing this mutually, but there's also the term relationality comes up for me too, that we're thinking about the relationship. It's, versus kind of individuality of just me, thinking about me. So, so that's kind of what comes up for me.
Okay, so you were contrasting with the 3 core concepts of Carl Rogers, and then you were kind of saying, okay, so then do we do that and then have these and organize it with a few sub goals, like Carl Rogers did, and then you were talking about and kind of like getting into, well, would it be mutuality or relationality, and the various different interpretations of what those would be.
Yeah.
And just kind of seeing if that would apply to that Carl Rogers model.
It's not that it applies to his model, but the way that people put concepts out into the world, organizing concepts, and that I see that the concept is there with made up of subcontext, like this whole self compassion concept that came out from Kristen Neff. She has several sub-concepts too, in sort of the same way. And I just see that pattern being used over and over again of having a main concept and several sub-contexts that, hold a lot. In each of those sub-concepts hold a lot of
Right.
too.
So you're looking not at Carl Rogers' model specifically, but his method of organization, which then you said Christian Neff also used,
Yeah.
and to see whether that's applicable.
And then I'm thinking, well, we've gone 2 hours, and maybe we should convene like next time when Carolina feels more engaged, because I would really like to have her, contribution to all this, because I really appreciate, I think it would add to the dynamics, too, to have, more points of to go over.
Okay. So then you're also thinking about ending the meeting and then reconvening next Monday when Carolina hopefully feels better.
Yeah.
And then, she can be, she'll be more able to add to the.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel heard.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I feel, the subcategories are okay as long as we don't go hog wild and get into too many details. Just something that people can then do that, and then and I also believe it needs to lead them into the practice. It's like exercise. You got to do it. I'd always tease my wife and I'd say, if you really love me, you do my exercises for me. So.
Yeah, so again, you're wanting something accessible and easy and not getting into the weeds, getting too complicated.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there was some kind of a joke about, I didn't quite get that, about that if you were doing exercise that Christine
Instead
would do.
of him.
Instead of, in other words, the other part was making the practice of doing the empathy circles integral into the goal, because otherwise, and the joke was, sort of like, like exercise. So, I mean, I will tease Christine sometimes, and I'll just get up in the morning. I say, if you really love me, you do my exercises for me. And so that's sort of like an unreal expectation on someone.
So you'd like to see the practice of the empathy circle as sort of a core component to the vision of a culture of empathy.
Yeah, thanks. I feel very heard.
And that creates a sense of, okay, and about meeting next week, or?
Yeah, I'm fine with meeting next week at 10:30.
Okay, 10:30.
Okay.
You too, Carolyn?
Yeah, that's okay for me. I just thought today that we meet at 9, for you it's 12 p.m. I don't know why. That's why I was late. But I wrote something else to your file. I wrote Overton Overton's window, the concept of perception, how well society can perceive the concept we want to spread. I just leave it as a kind of idea that we should look into.
Well, yeah. So that's like, if we're talking about a culture of empathy, what is the range of the discussion that the culture is sort of capable of discussing?
We have to. Sorry. Well, I'm alone and I feel like somebody is knocking doors. Okay. We just have to take into consideration how present society is able to understand what we mean. That's what it is. The Overton's window is about it.
Okay.
So it might.
So how current society can.
How current
understand.
Society is capable, I would say, even is capable to understand the concept and what we can express, what is sort of eatable by most of the society, majority of the society.
Okay, I just gotta know that. All right, so we'll pick up next week and we'll just keep building on this as our basic
Okay.
starting point. This is kind of the kernel, and we'll just keep using empathic listening to discuss
Mhm.
and flesh this out. So I feel good about it. It takes time, but I think it's productive.
Okay.
So okay,
I'm sorry that I'm not on form on shape.
No need to just,
Sorry.
you know, culture of empathy accepts you as you are.
Thank you.
absolutely.
Okay. All
Okay,
right,
we'll
take care,
see you
Lou.
next week. Oh, we'll see you. Friday then too.
Friday. Yeah.
Yeah,
But not for
Friday.
this 10:30 our time.
On Wednesday, we don't have any meeting.
We're doing empathy tent that just for the
Okay.
local group, but that's
Okay.
nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
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 See you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.